what the atmosphere is like. And of course, the people that are here all have tears in their eyes. I'm not sure if you can see the empty chair on the stage. The stage that you see here in Tehran's Grand Mosalla, this is actually reminiscent of the location where the martyred leader used to hold his public meetings with those who would come to meet him every now and then. We do know that the martyred leader used to hold regular meetings with the public, and of course the stage that you see here is reminiscent of Beit Rahbari, the martyred leader's home, and where he used to hold those mass meetings with people who would come to meet with the leader. Let's not forget, Danny, the leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Khamenei, was not just a religious leader. He was a political leader, also inspiring people far beyond Iran's borders. Like I said, there are people coming from countries in the region and beyond that have always looked up to Iran's martyred leader as a role model. He did definitely inspire the axis of resistance, and of course he will continue to do so.
And this empty chair behind me is the most heartbreaking scene for all of the lovers of Ayatollah Khamenei who come here to pay their final respects as they see this empty chair, and they have tears in their eyes as they say goodbye.
So, Gisud, how have the logistics challenges been managing this large number of people coming in and out of Grand Mosalla? From what you've seen, and what's the closest that you've experienced the Grand Mosalla getting nearly this occupied in the past, if you've ever seen anything get this close as far as the crowd goes?
Well, Danny, there's a lot of noise here, so I didn't quite catch the question, but I believe you asked something regarding crowd control, and I have to tell you, as I did take the routes that ordinary people would have to take in order to come to Tehran's Grand Mosalla, there have been immense crowd control strategies in place now to make sure that there will be easy access for all of those who want to come to Tehran's Grand Mosalla. Every step of the way, there are several points where people will have to wait for the crowd that has entered before them to come out, and then they can enter the next stage. And that is a great technique to make sure that not only everyone gets to come inside Tehran's Grand Mosalla, but also, and of course pay their final respects, but also make sure that there is a safe passage inside and outside Tehran's Grand Mosalla. Also, people have been given instructions as far as they come inside Tehran's Grand Mosalla. They're free to stay as long as they want, but they have been given also instructions to make room for more people to enter. The crowds are huge, Danny, and we are expecting about 15 to 20 million mourners to come to Tehran's Grand Mosalla. It is very interesting to see how people and the mourners are cooperating actually with the security forces that are here to ensure the safe access and safe passage.
All right, thank you, Gisu. Stay safe until we speak again. Press TV's Gisu Misha Ahmadi joining us from Grand Mosalla. And now we also have Mr. Henry Hakamaki joining us, writer and podcaster from Tartar Sun. Hello, Mr. Hakamaki. A pleasure to have you join us, sir. Your initial thoughts about the late Iranian leader's life and legacy, and what has resonated with you throughout the decades that's attracted you toward the man, his persona, his policies, and someone like you in Tatarstan, a writer and podcaster. What was what draw you to the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei throughout the years?
Well, there's a few things that come off from the top of my mind. And first of all, thank you for the invitation again to come on to Press TV. The first things that come to mind when thinking of the late Ayatollah are that first we have to acknowledge the fact that his period of power was one that was of great pressure on Iran for the entire duration of its time. The United States in particular had never lifted pressure from Iran at any point during his time as Ayatollah. And despite that, Iran is still a united society. The Islamic Republic still stands in the face of continued aggression by the United States that began not just with the most recent wars, but has been a continuous focus of American foreign policy. It's also something that's very important to consider that there, in recent years in particular, have been outreaches from the Islamic Republic to other states, including Russia, where I live, and particularly Tatarstan, the republic which you just mentioned, as a way of reaching out to the outside world and engaging with the world outside of just regional countries that are next to Iran. So here in Tatarstan, there has been a really interesting role that we've seen being played in the last few years as a bridge between the rest of Russia and Iran, and then also making connections with the rest of the Islamic world. The Russia Islamic World Strategic Vision Group in Kazan is a platform for dialogue that challenges Western hegemony. Tatarstan plays a central role, obviously, with the group being based here, but Iran plays a very central role in those talks as well. And we can see firsthand that Iran's engagement in these issues is part of a strategic thinking of how to break free of the imperialist system that is held up by the United States and its allies in Western Europe. And the third thing, before I turn it back over to you, is to discuss the importance of Iran in the resistance in Palestine, in occupied Palestine. This is something that's been going on for decades. It's a very critical point to think that when we're discussing Palestine, there is always a tendency in the West to focus specifically on the events that began on October 7th, 2023 and continuing to today. But that in reality, when looking at the situation, we have to go back decades and decades and decades and decades, even before 1949. And since the foundation of the Islamic Republic and through the entirety of Ayatollah Khamenei's time as Ayatollah, there has been staunch support for the resistance in Palestine, much more than can be said for just about any country in the world. And for those of us that believe in the liberation of Palestine, that is a central thing that we have to keep in mind in terms of his legacy and how we honor him on this day of commemoration.
And Henry, you mentioned the great pressure, and much of that great pressure was born out of the great leaders' policy toward the oppressed, namely the Palestinians, the great to build any part of the country's defense, to be tech-rich in a tech-rich world, to stay ahead in the technology race, or at least to try to keep up with crippling sanctions and whatnot, to excel in education, to excel in space and the cosmos, to expand even diplomatically. There are so many barriers and walls that Iran's adversaries out of DC and through the machinations of Tel Aviv in the region try to impose on the country, and much of it has to go back hand in hand with the first part and the second part of what you said. All the challenges and then the support for Palestine go hand in hand throughout the great leader's tenure, and basically what's going to take Iran, it's a policy that's going to be entrenched in Iranian jurisprudence moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at the way that Iran functions under sanctions is very interesting, especially, again, as somebody who lives in Tatarstan, Russia, where we also see how Russia is operating under sanctions. Sanctions which, for most countries, would be absolutely crippling. Russia continues to develop in the face of these sanctions. And Iran, if you look at the sanctions that have been on Iran for decades, and this is something that we did in an episode of Guerrilla History, a podcast that I host, if you look at the sanctions that have been on Iran for decades, it wouldn't be a surprise to see the entire society fall apart. Yet we see development taking place inside Iran. Yes, there are hardships. Yes, there are aspects of the economy that are not functioning as they should, and in many cases that's due to the sanctions. But despite that, and despite the massive sanctions that have been on Iran for decades, there is continued development. So what do we see coming out from this? Well, going all the way back to the statements of neither East nor West, Islamic Republic, when there was not a favoring of relations with one side of the geopolitical chessboard, but rather charting its own path, independent of the capitalist imperialism from the West, as well as independent from collaboration with the Soviet Union at the time, and we can again debate whether or not that was a mistake or not. They lived by that philosophy, and they made a model of governance that answered to no one. Under Khamenei's leadership, Iran has built a world-class ballistic missile and drone capability systems from scratch. Let that sink in. They went from having nothing to having one of the most advanced missile programs in the region, capable of striking targets over 2,000 kilometers away. He was clear about it. He declared Iran's nuclear and missile technologies as national assets that would be protected, like water and air. He said that they would never be a subject of bargaining. And his successor, the current Ayatollah, has repeated that commitment. Iran will protect its capabilities. This wasn't just military. He championed, as you mentioned, scientific advancement across the board in nanotechnology, biotechnology, stem cell research, aerospace. Iran now ranks amongst the world's leading countries in some scientific disciplines, again, in the face of crippling sanctions, precisely because of his emphasis on research, education, and indigenous innovation that was taking place within the country. And on the economy, he championed, and again, we can point to parts of the economy that aren't functioning as they could, and we can also look at how the sanctions are a factor in that. But on the economy, Ayatollah Khamenei championed the resistance economy, not as a slogan, but as a comprehensive blueprint for economic independence. There are analysts who have put it thusly: Iran's economy of resistance developed in ongoing response to waves of sanctions from the 1990s to 2025, with new coping mechanisms being devised in each wave. This is an iterative process of how to develop an economy, and one that looks at...
I didn't mean to cut you off, Henry. We're a couple minutes over time, but I really want to get you allow you finish your thought. But they're telling me that we got to go. I want to appreciate it. We'll finish our conversation in the near future. Mr. Henry Hakamaki, writer and podcaster, joining us from Tatarstan.
Thank you. Happy to come anytime.
You bet, buddy. Thank you. Meanwhile, Iran has issued a serious warning against any military adventurism by extra-regional powers in the Strait of Hormuz. In a post on X, Deputy Foreign Minister Qasem Khalibabadi said Iran is the power in charge of ensuring security of the strait and warned that the waterway is not a theater for military spectacle by foreign forces, and those creating crises will be responsible for the outcome. Now, his remarks come shortly after a joint declaration by France and the UK outlining plans to deploy a multinational naval mission to the region. Paris and London claim a move is intended to support freedom of navigation in the waterway. Yemen has announced its thwarted attempt by Saudi Arabia to prevent Iranian civilian aircraft from landing at Sana'a International Airport. In a statement, the Yemeni armed forces said Saudi warplanes entered Yemeni airspace early Friday before being intercepted by Yemeni air defenses, forcing them to have to withdraw. Now, the armed forces warned Saudi Arabia against any future violations, saying any aggression will trigger a comprehensive response targeting its airports and vital interests on land and the high seas. They also renewed calls for an end to a nearly 11-year-long Saudi-American blockade on Yemen. Yemen pointed out the Iranian aircraft that Saudi Arabia is referring to was carrying over 200 stranded, wounded, and sick citizens. The statement also praised Iran for taking the initiative to break the siege, and also thanked Tehran for transporting delegations participating in the funeral for martyred leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And to the war in Ukraine now, where Russia says it's taking full control of a key stronghold in the eastern region of Donetsk. Captured a city of Konstantinovka is a key transportation hub and a major industrial center in the region. Russian President Vladimir Putin has hailed the capture as having, quote, great strategic significance. He stressed it's a key first step towards seizing a Slovyansk-Kramatorsk defense hub. Meanwhile, Ukraine says its drone struck 2 Russian military airfields in the Crimea
Crimea region, damaging at least 7 aircraft. Developments come after Russia carried a major strike in Ukrainian capital Kiev, calling retaliation for Ukraine attacking Russian oil infrastructure. That's a wrap for your latest here on Press TV, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and bye-bye for now.
Behind me is a place very close to the office of the leader where people gather to pay their homage, to try and feel as close to him as they can, where they recite prayers and for his soul and try and find solace. Word cannot describe the amount of grief that you can feel here. Almost 3 months later after his martyrdom, people still feel like they are still mourning him, that they just heard about his martyrdom just a few days ago, a few hours ago. The grief here is palpable. People still cannot believe that he's no longer here with them. But even though we have this amount of grief, there's also hope from some of the people I have spoken with. They say, yes, we are grieving for this immense loss, but we are also hopeful for the future, for where Iran was and where Iran is going. And we're extremely proud of our country and our people. And that is something that is unique to Iran, that while they are grieving, they are also very hopeful for the future. And that is the lesson that they learned from the martyred leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who always insists in hope and looking into the future and not being stuck in grief alone. There is hope that this world, no matter how filled with injustice it has become, it will one day be restored back to justice. And if you can hear just from the sound around, the prayer for the Imam Mahdi is being recited. And this, I feel, from some of the people we've spoken to, is giving them solace that this period of pain will also come to an end. We will continue to bring you up to date on the situation in Iran as we bid farewell to the father of the nation.
They tried to isolate a movement. Instead, they amplified an idea. For decades, one voice stood at the center of a defining struggle in West Asia. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the martyred leader of Iran. He was more than a political and religious leader. He was a steadfast advocate of resistance, the refusal of nations to surrender their dignity in the face of pressure, occupation, or foreign domination. Resistance, he once said, means choosing the right path, the correct path, and starting to travel along that path with the obstacles unable to stop the travel. It was a principle that shaped Iran's national doctrine and became a recognized term in international political discourse. Ayatollah Khamenei consistently argued that resistance was the natural response of every free and dignified people confronted by intimidation and coercion. In his view, any nation that values its identity, humanity, and sovereignty must stand firm against what is imposed upon it. Nowhere was this conviction more visible than the martyred leader's support for the Palestinian cause. For years, he emerged as one of the most vocal champions of Palestine, framing its struggle not as a regional dispute, but as a question of justice, self-determination, and national liberation. His vision centered on the continuation of resistance until the occupied Palestinian territories were freed from settler colonial Zionist project. Ayatollah Khamenei often pointed to the achievements of resistance movements across the region: Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen. He argued that resistance had altered the course of tyranny, challenged powerful adversaries, and kept the Palestinian issue alive in global consciousness. Even amid wars, sanctions, and mounting regional tensions, his position remained unchanged. He remained steadfast. Today, supporters across the region remember him as a leader whose message never wavered. That power alone does not determine history, and that determined people can shape their own future. We can see how Iran did that. Following his principles as a beloved leader, statesman, an ideologue, or a symbol of resistance, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei leaves behind a legacy that continues to influence movements, debates, and struggles far beyond Iran's borders, because for him, resistance has never been just a strategy. It is a belief that dignity, once defended, can become a force that outlives generations. Once defended, can become a force that outlives generations.
که از جا نتوانه برش. هی میگن ما ناو فرستادیم طرف ایران. خیلی خوب، ناو البته یک دستگاه خطرناکی است، اما خطرناکتر از ناو اون سلاحی است که میتوانه این ناو رو به قعر دریا جمهور آمریکا در یکی از صحبت‌های اخیرش گفته که 47 ساله که آمریکا نتوانسته جمهوری اسلامی رو از بین ببره. شکایت کرده به مردم خودش. 47 ساله که آمریکا نتوانسته جمهوری اسلامی رو از بین ببره. این اعتراف خوبی است. بنده میگم تو هم نخواهی توانست این کار رو بکنی.
അങ്ങനെ കുറച്ച് മാധ്യമ വിളിച്ചു ചോദിച്ചപ്പോൾ അവിടുന്ന് പറഞ്ഞത് അങ്ങനെ
Roll camera and action.
आदि वो लोग कुछ शूट कर रहे हैं।
हमारे बिना
शूटिंग ऐसे कर रहा है? ये तो अपना गाना। या कम ऑन, धमाल की शूटिंग हमारे बगैर?
कहर कुड़े अख तेरी मार दिया फैर कुड़े मोरनी जी तोर तेरी जहर कुड़े कहर कुड़े निखरी तू सिखर दोपहर कुड़े बम्बे तू बम्बे तेरा शहर कुड़े कहर कुड़े कोई तेनू तितली कोई हीर कहे कोई इटली ते कोई कश्मीर कहे आइडल ने तेनू कुड़े कहण कुड़ियां ते बेबी डॉल तेनू नी मंडीर कहे खंड मिश्री तू मिठे तो बगैर कुड़े यट्टां दे पवांदी फिरे वैर कुड़े करे कत्ल तू असले बगैर कुड़े कहर कुड़े अख तेरी मार दिया फैर कुड़े मोरनी जी तोर तेरी जहर कुड़े कहर कुड़े निखरी तू सिखर दोपहर कुड़े बम्बे तू बम्बे तेरा शहर कुड़े कहर कुड़े तिखे तिखे तेरे कुड़े नक ने सताया सुशी खा के सारा नी तू सरी पिछे लाया मिलान दियां कंधां विच आ गई तरेड़ कुड़े लक दा हुलारा तेरा रास नहीं आया जरा ठहर कुड़े धरती हिलाउंदे तेरे पैर कुड़े वल खावे उठदी जो लहर कुड़े कहर कुड़े अख तेरी मार दिया फैर कुड़े मोरनी जी तोर तेरी जहर कुड़े कहर कुड़े तेरे पिछे बिल्लो किन्ने केस हो गए लॉकअप भी किन्नी वारी वेख हो गए नैना दी दनाली चली ठाक करके सीने विच मुंडियां दे शेक हो गए रोज तेरे उत्तों मारूं ढेड खोखा नी दे दवें जे सानू एक मौका नी जे तू इकलौती हाई इटली तो रंधावे दा मुंडा पूरा कोका नी खैर कुड़े गिल रौनी तेरा ना कोई गैर कुड़े तू कीमती नगीना है सफैर कुड़े